He wasn't a man of many words, but his silence carried a vision, a future he saw clearly, even when no one else did. His dream was simple, almost old-fashioned in a world chasing fast thrills. He wanted to build a home. Not just buy one, not rent one, build it with his own hands, his own sweat, his own heart. Since he was a boy, he'd watched his father work tirelessly in the fields, coming home with dirt on his skin and love in his actions. His mother would smile even when there wasn't much on the dinner table because the house was filled with peace, not possessions. That childhood home may have had cracks in the walls, but it had warmth in every corner. So, when he fell in love, really, truly in love, he didn't buy flowers or recite poetry. He made promises. Promises not with words, but with action. "One day, I'll build a home for you," he said. She laughed, teasing him, thinking he meant it metaphorically. But he didn't. Every time he walked past a construction site, he imagined the floor plan. Every time she mentioned a favorite color or curtain design in passing, he stored it in his mind like a blueprint drawn in memory. He worked double shifts, saved relentlessly, skipped nights out with friends, wore the same worn-out shoes year after year because he knew bricks were expensive, but love was worth the price. He would drive past empty plots of land, imagining a small garden where she could sip tea in the morning, a cozy kitchen where her laughter would bounce off the walls, a quiet room where she could read in peace, surrounded by everything she loved. It wasn't about status or show. He didn't want marble floors or chandeliers. He wanted belonging, a place where her soul would rest, not just her body. A place where their story would be written in quiet mornings and soft hugs. When he finally saved enough for the plot, he didn't tell her right away. He wanted it to be a surprise. He pictured her face lighting up when he'd take her there, just an empty field now, but in his eyes, already full of life, full of them. And when he did tell her, she smiled, not too wide, not too deep, but enough. Enough to make him believe that she wanted this dream too. From that moment on, his love took the shape of planning permits, cost estimations, and dusty afternoons at the construction site. While others wrote love letters, he drew maps. While others gave roses, he bought cement. While others posted couple pictures online, he worked overtime so she could one day take a photo in the doorway of their home, proud and secure. But love, when pure, doesn't measure in grand gestures. It grows quietly, like foundations underground, strong but unseen. And that's what he was building. A future, a promise, a place that would hold their best days and comfort their worst. What he didn't know, what he couldn't even imagine, was that the home he built with so much care would one day open its doors to a man who never lifted a single brick. But that truth hadn't arrived yet. For now, all he had was a dream, and a heart full of hope. The sun beat down on his back as he wiped the sweat from his brow with the same sleeve he had used to carry bags of cement just minutes ago. His hands, once soft and untouched by labor, had become calloused, skin cracked, fingernails rimmed with dust, fingerprints faded by the rough texture of bricks and steel. But he didn't mind, because every ache in his body reminded him of why he was doing this. For her. Always for her. She never asked him to build the house himself. In fact, she had once playfully suggested hiring a contractor, something quicker, something less tiring. But he had smiled and told her, "I want to feel it with my own hands. I want every wall to know I was here." She laughed, called him old school. But deep down, he hoped she would understand that this wasn't just a project. This was his heart, layered in concrete, steel, and sacrifice. He worked through heat, through rain, through aching limbs. There were no shortcuts, no complaints. While others built houses with money, he built theirs with devotion. Each morning, before leaving for the site, he'd make sure to leave her a note, scribbled with tired hands but carrying warmth. "Picked the tiles you liked. Ordered the lavender paint you mentioned. Can't wait to see you in our kitchen." She rarely replied. Sometimes just a smiley. Other times, nothing at all. But he brushed it off. She was busy, he told himself. Life gets busy. But his own life? It had shrunk to revolve entirely around that home. He spent weekends choosing window panes she once admired in a magazine. He remembered her mentioning she wanted natural light in the living room, so he redesigned the frame to include larger windows. Even the way the front door opened, he made sure it faced east, so she could see the morning sun when she stepped out. He remembered her favorite color, teal, and ordered bathroom tiles that matched her toothbrush. He knew she liked silence while cooking, so he chose appliances that didn't make much noise. Everything was for her. He turned down better-paying work opportunities in another city because he couldn't leave the project midway. It was their home, and he didn't want to miss a single moment of its creation. When the walls finally began to rise, people in the neighborhood admired his dedication. "Why not just hire a full crew?" someone asked. He smiled and said, "Because I want to look at these walls someday and say, I was there. I made this. For her." At night, after hours of work, he'd sit on the edge of the half-built porch, drinking tea from a thermos, imagining her sitting beside him, laughing, planning, dreaming. Sometimes he'd send her pictures. She'd reply with a nice. Once she said, "The kitchen looks small." He spent the next day adjusting the layout, tearing down a section to widen it, even though it meant extra labor and extra cost. Because when you're in love, even criticism feels like guidance. Even silence sounds like a request. He didn't know that while he was breaking his back over cement and stone, something in her heart had already started shifting. He didn't know that while he was carving her initials into the wooden beam of their bedroom doorframe, she had already stopped seeing that house as home. But he still believed. He believed in shared futures, in whispered goodnights, in the idea that love, when poured into something, makes it eternal. So he kept working, brick by brick, nail by nail, heartbeat by heartbeat. And when the roof was finally up and the walls were painted, he stood in the center of the empty living room, took a slow, deep breath, and whispered to himself, "It's ready. She'll be happy now." But homes don't stay warm with just paint. They need presence. They need loyalty. They need love that stays even when the lights go off. And while he had built her a shelter, he didn't yet know that he was building it for someone else's shadow to enter. The house was finally built, standing tall and complete, yet waiting for life to fill its empty rooms. And so she stepped in, not with gratitude, but with authority. She didn't admire the labor behind the walls, didn't pause at the doorframe where he had carved her initials with aching hands. Instead, she immediately began pointing. "That sofa should go here. This color's too dull for the hallway. These tiles don't match the theme I had in mind." He smiled through it, nodded, took mental notes. After all, he told himself, this was her space too. He wanted her to feel it was truly hers, not just something he built, and she had to accept. So, he let her take charge of the interiors. He watched her scroll endlessly on her phone, saving screenshots of curtains, lamps, dinner sets, and decor pieces that came with big price tags and bigger expectations. She wanted silk drapes for the master bedroom, the imported kind she had seen in some influencer's video. He said yes, even though he had to cancel the plan to buy a second-hand motorcycle that month. She wanted designer lights, not the local cheap ones, because ambience mattered more than affordability. He agreed, even though his savings had already started to thin. She insisted on a custom wardrobe. "The off-the-shelf ones don't match my aesthetic." He nodded, even though the carpenter's quote made his chest tighten. But love, when quiet and selfless, often forgets to ask for balance. He believed that making her happy would make them happy. So he stayed silent, about the bills stacking up, about the debts quietly forming, about the sleepless nights spent doing extra shifts to cover the credit card payments. He didn't want her to feel the burden. So he became the shield between her world of Pinterest dreams and the reality of limited means. Sometimes she would say things like, "Why don't you ever buy anything for yourself?" And he'd smile, because he had bought something for himself. Her smile, even if it came at the cost of his own comfort. He wore the same 3 shirts week after week. His shoes had holes at the heel. His phone screen had been cracked for months. But the home? It gleamed. Just the way she wanted. Their bedroom had velvet cushions and scented candles. The kitchen had a fridge too big for their needs, but perfect for her image. The drawing room had curtains imported from abroad. She boasted about them when friends visited, saying, "I like things that last, you know?" He stood in the background, smiling, nodding, while inside, something began to fray. He wasn't jealous of the things. He wasn't even upset at the spending. What tore him up was this. He was giving her everything she asked for, yet he still felt invisible. No one noticed the sleepless nights. No one saw the hands that stayed rough even after the house was complete. No one asked if he was okay. She called the house perfect, but she never called him enough. Sometimes he'd sit alone in the dining room after she went to bed, staring at the glow of the hanging lights she chose, sipping plain tea because dinner had gone cold waiting. And on the fridge, among the fancy magnets, was a to-do list she had written. Buy more candles. Get new vases. Change bedsheets. Call electrician. His name wasn't there. He was the one who made it all possible, yet had no place in the story she was now writing. He had built the foundation. She decorated the walls. But while she filled the house with things, he watched love quietly leave the room. She chose the curtains. He paid the price, not just in rupees, but in pieces of himself. At first, he loved how the house felt alive. After months of dust, construction, and silence, it now echoed with footsteps, laughter, and voices that reminded him of family, of community. She had always been social. She liked to host. And now that the house was complete, elegant, well-decorated, admired, she had a reason to invite people over. "Let's call my friends," she'd say, already on the phone before he could reply. "My cousin's coming to stay for the weekend. There's a small dinner, just 5 people." He smiled, because he thought the house would be happier with memories inside it. He would clean the porch before guests arrived, help arrange chairs in the drawing room, make last-minute grocery runs for her favorite desserts. And each time she laughed in front of company, he would watch her from the hallway or quietly from the kitchen and feel like all his hard work was finally paying off. This was what he built, a home full of life. But life has its shadows. One day, a new guest came. He was casual, friendly, and familiar. Too familiar. She introduced him as an old friend, someone she knew from university. "Oh, he's like a brother," she added with a laugh, waving it off. He trusted her. He really did. Because when you've given someone your whole world, doubt feels like betrayal too. The man came once. Then again. Then again the next week. Sometimes when her husband was at work. Sometimes when he wasn't expected home early. He noticed not just the frequency but the comfort. The man didn't knock the way guests do. He didn't wait at the door like someone unsure of their place. He walked in like someone who already belonged. Once, he found him pouring water from their kitchen jug as if it were his own. Another time, he saw him handing her a shopping bag. New cushion covers, scented candles, things she usually bought alone. Still, he said nothing. He watched. Quietly, but slowly, the house began to feel unfamiliar to him. She laughed more when that man was around. She dressed better, wore her hair differently, and played songs he had never heard before. She started cooking different food, more modern, more fusion, more like what the guests liked. It wasn't just the guest who was becoming frequent, it was who she was when he arrived. And the husband? He became background. A wall. A forgotten chair. A quiet ghost in his own home. He noticed the little changes. How she'd rush to the door when the bell rang, but not when he came home. How she'd keep her phone on silent when they were together, but turn it back on the moment the friend arrived. How she smiled with her eyes, for someone else. Still, he convinced himself. I'm overthinking. Maybe she just missed her old friends. Because admitting the truth was too painful, and trusting her felt like the only thing he had left. But one day, he returned home early, an unexpected half-day from work. He entered quietly, not to surprise her, but because he didn't want to disturb anything. And there, in the living room, through the half-open curtain, he saw them. Not too close. Not inappropriate, but comfortable. Too comfortable. She was laughing in a way he hadn't seen in months. Her eyes held a glow he thought she had lost. Only it wasn't for him. When she saw him, she stood abruptly, flustered. "You're early," she said, fixing her hair unnecessarily. The guest smiled. Too easily. Too confidently.
He forced a smile back.
Offered tea. Pretended. Because pretending felt easier than facing the collapse of everything he had built. That night, he sat alone in the porch, the same porch he once imagined watching sunsets with her. But all he could think of was that smile, that guest, and how the house still stood strong. But the foundation of trust had begun to crack. She had welcomed many guests. But this one didn't feel like a visitor. This one felt like a replacement in progress. The home he built was meant to keep her safe, not distant. But something was changing, slowly, quietly, painfully. She no longer came home with stories. No smiles. No chatter. No warmth. At first, it was just an hour late. Then 2. Then entire evenings. "I'm with friends. Don't wait up. There's a team dinner, just work stuff." He tried to understand. Tried to be supportive. He told himself not to overthink it. Modern couples give each other space, right? But space started to feel like separation. And then came the silence. She would return with tired eyes, not from work, but from something else. Emotionally drained, physically distant. She started keeping her phone locked. Not just locked, but guarded. She would take it with her into the bathroom, keep it on silent, and check it under the table when she thought he wasn't looking. Once she laughed while typing a message, then looked up and noticed him watching. The smile vanished. The screen flipped face down. That laugh wasn't his anymore. It belonged to a conversation he wasn't part of. He asked once carefully, "Everything okay?" She blinked like he'd interrupted something important. "Yes, I'm just tired. Can I not have a bad day without a full interview?" He apologized. He always did. Even when it was his heart breaking. Even when it was her distance cutting him deeper than silence ever could. He noticed she began dressing differently when going out. More makeup, more perfume, more effort, but never for him. And when she returned, she'd barely notice him sitting there, eyes full of worry, waiting. One night, dinner went cold again. He'd made her favorite, spicy rice and fried okra, the way she used to love it. The clock ticked past midnight. Still no message. No call. When she finally walked in, she didn't even notice the untouched food. Just said, "I'm exhausted," and headed straight to the bedroom. He followed. Quietly. Asked gently, "Where were you?" She didn't even turn around. "You're getting too suspicious. It's suffocating." That word hit him hard. Suffocating. He had built this house brick by brick, with the hope that it would be her peace, not her prison. Still, he didn't argue. He just stood there in the hallway listening to her close the door. Later that night, lying beside her in silence, he watched her sleep. Or pretend to. So much had changed. The room was the same. The bed was the same. But the space between them had grown wider than the walls could hold. He wanted to reach for her. Say something. But what do you say when the person lying next to you feels so far away? He began questioning himself. Was he not enough? Was he boring? Had he lost her interest somewhere between the sacrifice and the silence? But the saddest part wasn't the doubt. It was the hope. Because even now, even after all the signs, he still hoped it was just a phase. That one day she would look at him the way she used to. That she would come home early and choose to talk to him, not her phone. He believed in her more than he believed in himself. But that belief was beginning to break. Slowly, quietly, just like the woman she was becoming. The late nights continued. And so did the lies. But the one thing that changed forever was the feeling inside him. That deep, sinking truth. She was still in the house, but no longer in the marriage. He never checked her phone. Not because he couldn't, but because he trusted her. Or maybe he needed to trust her. Because admitting the truth meant admitting the collapse of everything he built. Not just the home, but the life inside it. But the truth has a habit of showing itself, not when you're ready, but when you're already hurting. It was a normal afternoon. She had left in a hurry, phone buzzing nonstop in her hand. She forgot to take her charger. He noticed it on the table and picked it up, thinking he'd just put it in her bag for later. That's when the screen lit up. One message. One name. One sentence. Can't wait to hold you again tonight, Red Heart. The name wasn't disguised. No fake contact, no code. It was the same man. The one who had become too frequent. The one who smiled too easily in their living room. Time slowed. His breath caught. He didn't open the phone, he didn't need to. Because sometimes, a single line holds the weight of 1,000 betrayals. He placed the phone down carefully, like it was made of glass, or like he was about to shatter. He sat down on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. The silence in the room screamed louder than his thoughts. He wanted to deny it, tell himself it was a joke, a misunderstanding, anything but the truth. But no lie could undo what that message had confirmed. She wasn't just gone emotionally. She had given her love to someone else. All those late nights, all the quiet dinners, all the distant hugs and distracted replies. They weren't random. They were symptoms. This message was the diagnosis. He spent the rest of the day walking around the house like a stranger. His house, his dream, now a stage for someone else's love story. He passed the living room where she once curled up beside him. The kitchen where he used to sneak behind her for a hug while she cooked. The balcony where he dreamed they'd grow old watching the sky change colors. Now, every corner felt foreign.
He didn't cry.
He didn't scream. He just stood still. Because betrayal doesn't always come with a loud sound. Sometimes it arrives like a quiet knife and cuts deep before you even know you're bleeding. That night, she came home humming. He watched her move around the house, casual, carefree, as if nothing had shifted. She kissed him lightly on the forehead. It felt more like a habit than love. He looked at her and wanted to ask, "Who is he to you? Was I never enough? Do you realize what you're doing to me?" But the words wouldn't come, because deep down he knew the answers. And he wasn't sure he could bear hearing them from her lips. So instead he said nothing. He just smiled faintly, like a man hiding a wound so deep it had reached the bone. That night, lying beside her, he stared at the ceiling for hours. She turned away, sleeping peacefully, or pretending to. And he realized, the pain wasn't just that she loved someone else. The pain was that she never loved him the way he loved her. Because when you truly love someone, you don't need to be caught to feel guilty. You already carry their pain in your own heart. But she didn't. That message was never meant for him. It never had been. And maybe, just maybe, neither was she. He had rehearsed the moment 100 times in his head. Not to accuse. Not to yell.
Just to ask.
Because some part of him still hoped, hopelessly, that there was a version of this story where she could explain it all away. That the message was old. That it wasn't what it looked like. That he was wrong. So he waited for the right moment. Not out of fear, but out of love. But love, when one-sided, becomes a quiet kind of cruelty. It was a Sunday afternoon. She was seated at the dining table, flipping through home decor ideas on her tablet. The same table where they once shared dreams, now silent, like a courtroom about to hear its verdict. He stood behind the chair opposite her, heart pounding louder than the ticking clock. "Can I ask you something?" he said. She didn't look up. Are you seeing someone else?" That made her pause. Just for a second. Just long enough to show she'd heard it clearly. Then she blinked, calm, composed, and looked up at him. "What makes you think that?" No panic. No guilt. Just the smooth deflection of someone who had been expecting this. "I saw a message on your phone." Another pause. A breath. She closed her tablet, sat back, folded her arms. "You went through my phone?" Her voice wasn't hurt. It was annoyed. "No," he said quietly. "I didn't open it. It just lit up. And I saw enough." Silence. Then, as if flipping a switch, she shrugged. "It's nothing."
Just like that.
Not a tremble in her voice. Not a drop of regret. Not a single apology. Nothing. He stood there, feeling the floor drop beneath him. Nothing, he repeated. He said he wanted to hold you again. That's not nothing. She sighed. Not in shame, but in irritation. You're reading too much into it. He's just a friend. We joke like that sometimes. That's not a joke, he said, voice trembling. That's intimacy. That's betrayal. She stood now, not to explain, but to leave the conversation. You're being dramatic. And there it was. No remorse. No admission. Just dismissal. As if the years he had given her, the house, the sacrifices, the loyalty, were a footnote she didn't care to read anymore. He followed her into the hallway. I deserve the truth. She turned, coldness in her eyes. You want truth? Fine. Maybe I needed someone who saw me, not just built things for me. You made a house, yes. But I was alone in it. That stung. Because she wasn't wrong about feeling lonely. But she had never said a word. She had never reached for him. Only away from him. I was here, he whispered. Every day. Every night. I gave you everything I had. And maybe that wasn't enough, she said flatly. He stood still. Because how do you respond to that? How do you reply to the realization that your best, your everything, was never enough for the person you gave it all to? He didn't argue anymore. Because she had made her choice. Not in words, but in the lie she wrapped in calm detachment. And the truth? The truth wasn't that she lied about the affair. The truth was that she no longer cared if he knew. It was supposed to be an ordinary evening. He had returned home early. Not by design, but because the power at his job site had gone out, and they had been told to wrap up for the day. As he walked through the streets toward home, something in his chest felt lighter. Maybe he was hoping that today would be different, that she'd be there, maybe even smiling, maybe even waiting. But fate had something else planned. He saw it before he reached the front gate. 2 shadows on the balcony. Laughter, hers. Soft and familiar. The same laugh he used to hear when they were still in love. But this time, it wasn't for him. As he stepped closer, the second figure came into view. Him. The same man whose name appeared on that message. The same one she once introduced as just an old friend. The same one she had defended when he questioned her late nights. They didn't see him, at first. The man was standing too close. Her head tilted just enough for their foreheads to nearly touch. Her hand lightly rested on the balcony railing, close enough that his fingers brushed hers without guilt. The scene froze him. Not because he hadn't expected it, but because seeing something with your own eyes makes it real in a way nothing else does. His breath caught. His heart slowed. Everything around him, the street, the sky, the sound of the wind, faded into silence. She finally noticed him standing at the gate. She didn't jump, didn't move away, didn't even flinch. She just looked at him, expressionless. No guilt, no fear, no shame. The other man looked uncertain, even a little uncomfortable. But she was calm, cold, almost annoyed that she'd been interrupted. He walked into the house slowly, methodically, like a man entering a burning building even though he knew it might collapse on him. When he reached the balcony door, she had already stepped back inside. You're home early, she said flatly, as if she had been caught doing dishes, not disloyalty. That's him, he asked, nodding toward the man who had now awkwardly taken a step back. She didn't answer, didn't deny it, didn't bother lying. You already know, don't you? She said, her voice tired, not with regret, but with the exhaustion of pretending. He looked at her for a long time. The woman he had built a home for. The woman he had loved when she had nothing. The woman he had trusted enough to never check her phone until it betrayed him on its own. She wasn't crying. She wasn't begging. She wasn't explaining. And he realized this wasn't an accident. This wasn't a mistake. This was a decision. She had chosen this. And worse, she wasn't sorry. He turned to the man, his voice surprisingly steady. Do you love her? The man hesitated. She answered for him. That's none of your business anymore. Those words, sharp, final, cruel, pierced deeper than any betrayal. After everything, he whispered, you can't even say sorry? She didn't look away. didn't soften. "I didn't cheat on you," she said, arms crossed. "I just stopped pretending." That was her truth. And she said it like a burden lifted from her chest, as if he had been the lie all along. He didn't raise his voice, didn't cry. He just looked around the home he had built, brick by brick, dream by dream, and felt the walls watching him in silence. This wasn't a fight. It wasn't even a conversation. It was a funeral. Not for the marriage, but for the man he had been. The dreamer, the builder, the believer. She didn't follow him when he turned away. She didn't try to stop him when he walked down the stairs. She didn't ask where he was going, because she didn't need to. She had made her choice long before he ever caught her. All he had done was finally see what had already changed. And the worst part wasn't what she did. It was that she could do it without remorse. The house was quiet. Too quiet for a place that had once been filled with hope. He stood in the center of the living room. The one she had decorated, the one guests had praised, the one that looked like a home, but no longer felt like one. His eyes scanned the walls, painted in her favorite tones. Photographs in frames, some still holding the illusion of a smiling couple. Curtains she had chosen. Furniture he had lifted up the stairs with his bare hands. It all still stood, but he was ready to walk away. The night he saw her with him, the way she looked, the way she didn't explain, didn't apologize, something inside him broke. Not loudly, not violently, but permanently. For days after, he stayed silent. Not because he had forgiven, not because he didn't feel, but because he needed to decide. What do you do when the house you built with love becomes a museum of pain? He ate alone, slept on the edge of the bed, watched her move around the home like he was invisible. There was no regret in her eyes, only freedom. She had moved on, even while still living under his roof. And now so would he, but not in the way she had. Not through betrayal, not through lies, through letting go. He didn't announce it, didn't leave a dramatic note, didn't slam a door or throw accusations. He simply packed a small bag, not with clothes but with essentials. His documents, a few old photographs, and a shirt his mother had gifted him years ago, before he ever met the woman who would undo him. He looked around the home one last time. This was the kitchen where he cooked for her, the living room where he waited for her to come home, the hallway where he once imagined their children would run, laughing barefoot, the bedroom where his silence had screamed louder than her betrayal ever did. And yet he felt peace, because for the first time in years he was choosing himself. As he walked to the door, she saw him with the bag. "Where are you going?" she asked, not with worry, just mild curiosity. "Somewhere I can breathe," he said softly. She looked at him for a moment. Not angry, not sad, not even surprised, just indifferent. And that hurt more than anything else, because once she would have cried if he was late from work. Once she would have called a dozen times if he didn't answer his phone. Once she would have run to the door to hug him when he came home. Now, she just watched him leave, like a stranger walking out of a hotel lobby. He stepped outside and closed the door behind him, not to punish her, not to make a point, but because staying would have meant continuing to shrink. And he had already shrunk too much. In the name of love, in the name of loyalty, in the hope of something that was never truly his. He walked down the street slowly. No destination, no plan, but for the first time in a long time, no weight pressing on his chest. He didn't take the house, didn't ask for anything, didn't fight over property or possessions, because all of that was just stone and wood. What he really wanted, love, respect, truth, those were never hers to give. So he took only what was his peace, his dignity, his freedom. And as the house disappeared behind him, he didn't cry, he didn't look back, because some doors aren't meant to be reopened. Some homes were only meant to be built, not lived in forever. The house still stood, tall, elegant, untouched. From the outside, nothing had changed. The windows were clean. The paint was fresh. The flowers in the front garden still bloomed the way he once imagined they would, soft, colorful, alive. But inside, everything was different. The laughter was gone. The warmth that once came from shared dinners, small glances, and quiet hugs had long faded. The walls echoed now, not with sound, but with emptiness. Neighbors still waved when they passed by, assuming all was well inside. No one knew he had left. No one knew that the man who gave everything to that home was no longer part of it. She lived there still, in the same rooms he had dreamed in the same bed he had waited in the same kitchen where he once placed her favorite tea beside her every morning, hoping it would make her smile again. But she moved around the house differently now, as if nothing had ever been shared. As if his touch had never softened the door handles, his hands had never carried the furniture, his heart had never poured itself into the floors beneath her feet. She didn't change the locks, didn't remove the photo frames immediately, but she did stop mentioning his name, even to herself. And the house, though silent, seemed to remember. The creak of the hallway where he once stood waiting for her return. The small dent on the kitchen counter where he dropped a bowl the day he learned her favorite uncle had passed. The blanket on the couch still folded the way he used to do every night. Memories didn't leave just because people did. They lingered, even when unwanted, even when painful. But the one thing that no longer lingered was him. He, too, remembered. Even after leaving, some nights, he'd walk past the old street, just to feel something familiar. He'd see the balcony light on and wonder, not out of longing, but out of curiosity. Does she ever feel what I felt? Does she ever miss what we had, before she let it slip through her hands? He never went back, not even once, because he knew, no matter how strong the structure, a house without a soul was just a shelter. And his soul? He had taken it with him the day he walked away. He rebuilt his life, slowly, painfully, honestly. A smaller apartment, a quieter street, no framed photos yet, no big kitchen, but peace. Peace that came not from being with someone, but from finally being enough for himself. He started painting again, started reading, started living, not waiting. And every time he looked in the mirror, he no longer saw a man lost in someone else's shadow. He saw a man who had survived betrayal, heartbreak, and silence, and still chose to be kind. Back in the house he built, seasons changed. Rain fell on the roof he had paid for. Wind passed through windows he once polished. Guests came and went, friends of hers, new faces, loud conversations that had no place for the man who built it all. But the house remembered. It remembered the nights he stayed up fixing the broken pipe in the bathroom while she slept. It remembered how he stood in the backyard holding her hand the day they got the keys. It remembered the man who believed that building a home would build a forever. And though she moved on, maybe even loved again, the soul of the house had already gone. Because it was never the walls that made it special. It was him, his presence, his effort, his love. Love that was never returned the way it should have been. Love that was replaced by whispers, secrets, and eventually silence. But in that silence, he found clarity. He hadn't failed. He hadn't been weak. He had loved honestly, and walked away with dignity. The house remained. But the heart? It had long since packed its bags, stepped out into the cold, and never looked back.